Is the discussion time on the program. Of course, we are going to be extending the conversation from Daybreak Interactive, talking about the new minimum wage of 70,000 naira. And now to provide expert and economic analysis on this development, we have in the studio Jamilu Muhammed. He's an economic analyst and also an author. He has written several articles on Nigeria's economic situation, which has been published on Daily Trust. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. Good morning.
First thing first, Jamilu, walk us through your first reactions when you heard that minimum wage is now been set at 70,000.
Well, I think administratively, it is a win-win situation for all the parties involved, all the stakeholders, administratively. But I think technically, economically, there are still issues that I think we still have to look at. We have to go deep inside. This 70,000 minimum wage, so to say, as it is defined, when you say minimum wage, I understand, my own understanding of the Nigerian system and the global system is that wages are different from salaries. I think this is something we have not considered. When we talk about minimum wage, we are talking about possibly daily pay or hourly pay. Now, but the discussion was centered on minimum wage, while the actual thing that was being discussed was actually minimum salary. I think even administratively, these things they got it wrong. This is quite different.
We'll talk more about it, Jamilu. One second. If we'll be going on a break now, definitely, and when we return, we'll be talking about the other implications of this new minimum wage, especially on the lives of Nigerians, and the other expectation in terms of possible or likely inflation that might come with this announcement. See you on the other side. Yes, welcome back. It's still Daybreak on Trust TV, and we have Jamilu Muhammed, economic analyst, with us in the studio. Yes, Jamilu, before I cut your thoughts short, you were talking about the fact that, well, the government on the administrative side might have gotten it wrong in terms of the nomenclature of minimum wage as opposed to a minimum salary requirement.
Yes, not only the nomenclature, even the implementation. You see, I think one big problem about our system is that we have administered, or we have designed the system based on sectors. Now, the salaries themselves, they are designed by sectors. You have the health sector salary system, you have the academic sector salary system, and so on and so forth. I think in today's world, that is wrong. We are supposed to sector our salaries and wages according to skills. If I am a statistician, I can be a medical statistician, I can be a financial statistician, but I still remain a statistician. So I think my salaries should be based on my technical output, on my technical competence, not on the sector I service. But the Nigerian system is such that it is on the sector we service, such that now what labor is negotiating, or the community for which labor is negotiating, is the civil service sector or the civil service community.
So it doesn't capture the entire basket of
it doesn't. It actually doesn't, because if you go to the private sector, already the private sector has been deregularized, and the salaries, although not very much, coordinated, yet if we would have what we have in the private sector, if we would have that in the public sector, I think there will be competition, and that's what economy wants. Now, salaries are not competitive in this country. And one big factor in this is what? Corruption. That corruption index, whatever you do in Nigeria, whatever calculation you do, make sure you put that corruption index. The index is actually above 0 in the Nigerian case. in other economies, it might be close to zero, maybe something like that. But in the Nigerian system, it's high above zero, so you have to put it. Now, many people would want to go into the public sector, in the civil service, where the corruption is very much endemic. You see, you cannot employ a worker and then without a long-term benefit for that worker. You cannot do that. If you do that, you definitely know you are opening doors of corruption for the worker. So what the Nigerian system should have been is that, for instance, if you are coming in as a worker, at the minimal stage, you are coming in, there is something, for instance, like housing. To say immediately you are employed by government now gives you a house.
Provision for, yes.
A house as a mortgage. It can be a single bedroom apartment at the most minimal stage. Then now, over the years, you will be remitting. So at least you know you have a stake in the system. Your salary should be based on this, not on the daily bread. I think we have very much past that stage that workers should be thinking about daily bread. I think in this country, I don't believe that this country is that poor.
Well, Jamilu, we might have passed that stage, but unfortunately, it's where we are currently. I mean, during the Daybreak Interactive, where I got to speak with Nigerians about this development, some of them voiced these concerns, real concerns, especially in states. I mean, they talked about school fees in a situation where in Nigeria, primary education is supposed to be free across board. People are still talking about paying school fees for their children, not because they don't want to take these children to public schools, but because the quality of education that they think will come from these public schools, they are not satisfied with. So isn't this a double jeopardy for Nigeria?
Yes, I actually sympathize with our situation in Nigeria, most especially on the issue you have just taken up. You see, basic education, the UBE system, is supposed to be free and compulsory too. But where are the implementers, where are the enforcers, where are the regulators? If they are not ready to do it, now this is where labor too is supposed to channel most of its energies. It's not only about salaries, but useful salaries. If I collect my salary, what should I do with it? I know labor, you know that I do pay school fees wrongly. At that level, at the UBE level, first 9 years, I am not supposed to pay a single kobo. And if the government is even supposed to force me to take my child to school, it's not, yes, I am a citizen ordinarily. An ordinary citizen would have to think about that and say, okay, let me take my child to school. But if a citizen does not want to do it, you look at the larger society, you don't allow one single citizen to destabilize the society. So you have to force the citizen to take. So labor and civil society organizations are supposed to channel their energies in this regards to say that, okay, now if you collect salaries at that primary level, you do not pay school fees. Engage government in that.
Okay, does this now justify the seeming mistrust that Nigerians have for the government and also for the organized labor? I'm asking this question because if at the end of the day it is the responsibility of somebody in government to ensure the enforcement of primary school education's accessibility to Nigerian citizens and nobody is doing that, how can we then believe that the government is going to do something right in the next 3 years to ensure that the minimum wage is reviewed and the economy is put in order to provide, an environment for Nigerians to live and thrive?
That's why I say it's a win-win situation administratively. You see, administratively, yes, these things are there. You see, the whole issue is government is a bit disorganized. I'm sorry to say that. You see, the 70,000 minimum wage itself, if you are talking about suspicion, of course, there is deep suspicion between government and the governed. This is how it exists. Not only that the governed are suspicious or are seeing the government as there's a lot of mediocrity in the system. Government too is deeply suspicious of the governed. And you do not blame the government itself. The 70,000 minimum wage, on what is it based? When Labour came and said, we want 650,000, and then later on they reviewed it, they said, okay, for now, okay, they came down to 250 and so on. On what factors, what channels you are thinking towards, what generated those figures? Nothing. They were just hypothetical. They just sat down and said, okay, let us look at this. Let us look at this figure. Ordinarily, you are supposed to look at so many factors. I just gave the factor of, for instance, housing.
But I think for Labour gives some factors: cost of transportation, cost of food, cost of living in Nigeria.
These costs are volatile variables. You cannot hinge this thing on volatile variables. These things can change any second. This was why I actually challenged, for instance, ASU. When ASU presented that their 2009 agreement, they said they have accepted. Most of what is there are figures. How can you base your negotiations on raw figures? If the economy changes, if prices change, what would you do?
So we might even be getting it wrong in terms of negotiating.
Of course. In terms of negotiating, look at very, very stable factors and base your arguments on these factors. Let me give you how volatile the factors they hinge their calculations on. Look at, for instance, let's also look at 2 months ago. In May, the federal government earned about 390 billion FAC allocation. That was in May.
Yes.
In June, it is 260 billion. Look at the difference, 120 billion naira difference in just 1 month. How can you account for that in the market? You can. It's so volatile. So it would also affect that cost of transportation, cost of
all the other things.
The primary driver of our inflation today is food. And the government is talking about, okay, we have opened a window, importation of foodstuff, but who will import? From which, how would you get the foreign exchange? You see, so these factors, you have to base your factors not on daily volatile factors. Base them on sometimes even static factors.
Such as?
I gave housing, for instance.
Indeed.
If you are employing somebody, give him something that he will hold on to, that I believe in this. This is why I am going to the office. I am not only going to the office to get to work and then try feeding myself. Every day you are trying to feed yourself. You are not sure of the next day if you go, your landlord will eject you and so on and so forth. As a matter of fact, even if you have your own house, it is not even very habitable. So that you have to standardize and say, this is, if I employ you, this is what you are getting.
You are benefiting.
This is what you are benefiting. If I'm not giving you that, my calculation of your salary would be based on that. If they are saying about cost of transportation and so on and so forth, what of housing? What of education? This health
insurance.
I think these are the very basic things labor are supposed to negotiate on. If you negotiate on salaries, go back and look at how these salaries are being utilized. Health insurance, how many people are enrolled? How many people in the private sector? How many people in the public sector? You have to look at the performances. And as I tell you today, if we go and look at our statistics, it will be very difficult for us even to a kind of differentiate or a kind of categorize that this public sector is so percent of our labor force, the private sector is so percent of our labor force. You see, government is supposed to say, we have to operate a kind of a system to say, we have a small government, big country. in the sense that our civil service is supposed to be smaller than the public sector. So what if somebody is graduating? When I was in school, I had actually prayed. I said, God, if not only that you know that I have something to benefit in the public sector, in the civil service, God, I don't want to go there. Give me my private life.
So from that time, you already knew the implications.
I knew that the public sector is so bastardized. You cannot come there and say, I have come to make money.
So
it's not possible.
Let's now talk about the implications of all of this. We already seem to be getting it wrong in terms of hinging our negotiations on some of these volatile factors that you've already mentioned. However, some of the implication might involve a situation when this money is run out, when it's not even the middle of the month, and Nigerians now and these civil servants have now, been put under this pressure to survive. There comes those thoughts about corruption. How do we then begin to manage all of this?
The civil service system is already very much enmeshed in these things. We have to draw up a program. We have to sit down, look at, we do design 5 years development plans and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, the implementation would always be a problem. But if we will sit back and look at, you see, you have a situation where this simple announcement would have a kind of engulfed the system.
Just like we saw with
subsidy issue. Now, people will start saying, okay, minimally, we know 70,000 naira is going into your own pocket.
So people will start calculating your salaries for you.
Yes, of course. By now, people would have, in fact, debtors would have started saying, okay, now I know you can pay my debt. There's money in your pocket. The problem is how much of this 70,000 is going to the market, directly to the market. How much is being saved? You see, our saving culture would, the system would have to look at our saving culture. If you give me 70,000 naira, how much am I spending a month? How much am I saving? How much am I investing?
Is it even possible to save?
That is the issue. That is the issue. That is why if you talk about 70,000 naira, is a kind of dish away. Okay, collect this, go
make something out of it.
Make something out of it, or let the negotiation now
relax.
Let it be suspended for now. This is just what has happened. But otherwise, we do know with the present situation, 70,000 naira will not do you good in our own system. Unfortunately, we do not even have a kind of statistics to look at and say we are now hinging our 70,000 naira on this. This is what we are going to spend out of it. Now, the structure itself, maybe by 70,000 naira, the highest person in the civil service possibly would be collecting 700, 800,000 and so on and so forth. I think this is what it is. So how much of this would now go to the market? Because you are giving these people this in order to ease, to give them to raise their purchasing power. Now, if you are raising the purchasing power, how would the market react? I don't know if government has sat down to look at to consider this, because most of us, okay, it is a subsistence kind of living. We live hand to mouth. Now, we do not a kind of our production capacity is very low, even the civil service itself. How are we going to address the issue of ghost workers? Of course, it exists, most especially in the states and the local governments. The parity there is so alarming, such that if you what what government is calculating about the 70,000 naira, giving it to its own workers, how much of that 70,000 naira is actually real? Indeed. Some of them are just sitting down at home collecting the 70,000 naira without being actual workers. I don't know at the federal level. I cannot actually speak. I suspect it still exists, but I do know in the state. I do know that in the state and the local governments, such things exist.
All right.
And the federal government, this is by the federal government's negotiation, so to say. The states were complaining that what the federal government is negotiating is on its own side. They cannot
afford it.
But let me tell you, if you know what is in the states are supposed to even pay higher than the federal government. This is what it's supposed to be.
This conversation is a developing one, of course, and definitely will be providing more context subsequently, of course. But for now, unfortunately, the director has told me that the time is up and we might need to move on from this segment. However, a new minimum wage has been announced, 70,000. Are Nigerians happy? Well, the responses that we've gotten from them shows quite the obvious. Thank you so much, Jamilu Muhammed, economic analyst, for sharing perspectives and, of course, breaking it down for Nigerians to understand. We do hope to have you subsequently to discuss more on this issue.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, indeed. And we now go on a short break, and when we return, it will be the newspaper review segment. Daybreak continues shortly.